Good morning, gardeners. This is Anna, and I'm in the garden at Unity Church-Unitarian this morning. It's a lovely morning with a slight breeze. We have some flowers blooming. The birds are singing. I've heard cardinals and robins and lots of house sparrows. So life is happening here. We always start with the lighting of the chalice as we welcome all of our viewers to this session. We light this chalice as a symbol of our faith, the light of truth and the warmth of love. And you can join me as we sing our flame song. Rise up, O flame, by thy light glowing, show to us beauty, vision, and joy. Rise up, O flame, by thy light glowing, show to us beauty, vision, and joy. Always as part of our liturgy, we share our joys and sorrows, and this week I had 3 families that came to help me plant, and it was such a joy to be together in this space. And even though I was on one side of the bed and they were on the other side of the bed, we could talk, we could laugh, we could talk and smile at each other, and it was just wonderful. So that is my joy for today. Today we are going to use our imaginations, so the visioning part of our song, and I'm going to ask you to think a lot about what might be. When I was a kid and summer rolled around, I loved it because for me it was a time of freedom. If I wanted to read a book, if I had a good book, I would just curl up in my bed and I'd spend all day under the covers reading a book and nobody complained. If I wanted to go outside, I could get on my bike, I could explore, and it seems like I was always outside. I was always digging in the dirt and helping my mom in the garden. Anyway, summer feels kind of like it came early this year with COVID, and we're all sort of stuck at home. And even though we miss our friends and we've still got school assignments, it's a good time to do some imagining. And the story we have today is Westlandia, written by Paul Fleischman and illustrated by Kevin Hawkes. And it's a story about a boy who was a little bit of an outcast, but he had a tremendous imagination and he had an incredible garden. And I'm going to pass this to Dan Huelster, who's going to read this story.
This morning's story is Westlandia by Paul Fleischman. And I love the end papers, which have a different script to it. Westlandia. This is about a boy named Wesley. Of course he's miserable, moaned Wesley's mother. He sticks out like a nose, snapped his father. Listening through the heating vent, Wesley knew they were right. He was an outcast from the civilization around him. An outcast. He alone in town disliked pizza and soda, alarming his mother and the school nurse. He found professional football stupid. He refused to shave half his head, the hairstyle worn by all the other boys, despite his father's bribe of $5. Each afternoon, his mother asked what he'd learned in school that day. Well, that seeds carry great distances in the wind, he answered on Wednesday. That each civilization had its own food crop, A staple food crop, he answered on Thursday. That school's over and I should find a good summer project, he answered on Friday. As always, his father mumbled, I'm sure you'll use that knowledge often. Suddenly, Wesley's thought shot sparks. His eyes blazed. His father was right. He could actually use what he'd learned that week for a summer project that would top all others. He would grow his own staple food crop and found his own civilization. The next morning, he turned over a plot of ground in the yard. Do you know what it means to turn over something? To turn the soil, to make an area to grow things. That night, wind blew in from the west. It raced through the trees and swept his curtains, set his curtains snapping. Wesley lay awake listening. His land was being planted. Five days later, the first seedlings appeared. You'll have almighty bedlam on your hand if you don't get those weeds out, warned the neighbor. Actually, it's my crop, replied Wesley. In this type of garden, there are no weeds. Following ancient tradition, Wesley's fellow gardeners grew tomatoes, beans, Brussels sprouts, and nothing else. Wesley found it thrilling to open his land to chance, to invite the new and the unknown. Well, the plant shot up past his knees, then his waist. They seemed to be all of the same sort. Wesley couldn't find them in any plant book. Are those tomatoes, beans, or Brussels sprouts? Asked Wesley's neighbor. None of the above, replied Wesley. Well, fruit appeared, yellow at first and blushing to magenta. Wesley picked one and sliced through the rind to the juicy purple center. He took a bite and found the taste an entrancing blend of peach, strawberry, pumpkin pie, and flavors he had no name for. Ignoring the shelf of cereals in the kitchen, Wesley took to breakfasting on the fruit. He dried half a rind to serve as a cup, built his own squeezing device, and drank the fruit's juice throughout the day. Pulling up a plant, he found large tubers. On the roots, these he boiled, fried, or roasted on the family barbecue, seasoning them with a pinch of the plant's highly aromatic leaves. Oh, it was hot tending to his crop. To keep off the sun, Wesley wove himself a hat from strips of the plant's woody bark. His success with a hat inspired him to devise a spinning wheel and a loom on which he wove a loose-fitting robe from the stalk's much softer inner fibers. And here's Wesley's loom. And I'm noticing something. He has some observers who are not the neighbor. Unlike jeans, which he found scratchy and heavy, while the robe was comfortable. It reflected the sun and offered myriad opportunities for pockets. Wesley's schoolmates were scornful, but then curious. Grudgingly, Wesley allowed them 10 minutes apiece at his mortar, crushing the plant seed to collect the oil. The oil had a tangy scent and served him as mosquito repellent. He rubbed it on his face each morning and sold small amounts to his former tormentors at the price of $10 per bottle. "What happened to your watch?" asked his mother one day. Wesley admitted that, he no longer wore it. He told time by the stalk that he used as a sundial and had divided the day into 8 segments, the number of petals on the plant's flower. And here is his sundial. He adopted a new counting system as well, based likewise on the number 8. His domain, home to many such innovations, he named Westlandia. Uninterested in traditional sports, Wesley made up his own. These were designed for a single player and used many different parts of the plant. His spectators looked on with envy. Realizing that more players would offer him more scope, Wesley invented other games that would include his schoolmates, games rich with strategy and complex scoring systems. He tried to be patient with the other players' blunders. August was unusually hot. Wesley built himself a platform and took to sleeping in the middle of Westlandia. He passed the evenings playing a flute he'd fashioned from a stalk, or gazing up at the sky, renaming the constellations. His parents noted Wesley's improved morale. It's the first time in years he's looked happy," said his mother. Wesley gave them a tour of Westlandia. What do you call this plant?" asked his father. Not knowing its name, Wesley had begun calling it Swist, from the sound of its leaves rustling in the breeze. In like manner, he'd named his new fabrics, games, and foods until he had created an entire language. Mixing the plant's oil with soot, Wesley made a passable ink. As the finale to his summer project, he used the ink in his own 80-letter alphabet to record the history of his civilization's founding. In September, Wesley returned to school. He had no shortage of friends. And this is the story of Wesley, who allows the wind to carry the seeds in and find the fertile ground, and you just never know what's going to grow. And with this, we'll go back to the garden.
Thank you, Dan. So what do you think? Was he an imaginative kid? He sure is. See if you can think of all the things he did. First, he dug the soil and he let the wind plant his seeds. And when the plants came up and he couldn't find them in any book, he created a name for them. He called them Swist. In fact, he created a whole alphabet and he created a whole language for this land that he was going to build. And he used this plant first as food. He ate the pulp and he drank the juice. And he made cups out of the rind of the fruit. And what else did he do? He made hats, he made clothing, he created games, and by the time he was all done, he had an entire civilization invented, and all the neighborhood kids followed him into that endeavor, and they had tremendous fun. So I want us to think about our garden here, the onions, the chives, the lettuce, the tomatoes, the garlic, everything that we've got in this garden. And I'm going to ask you to close your eyes and imagine that you were here, and think maybe about times in the past when you were in the garden and the kinds of things we would do there together. What things did you particularly like? What would you like to do more of? What did we not do that you think we could do? Use your imagination. And when I think about the plants in this garden, I think about what we do with that food. So you can think about that too. We obviously eat some of it. We share it with the neighbors. So the food shelves get some of our surplus. But could this food be used for somebody else? Could it be food for the birds or the insects? One of the things about Westlandia is that he had all these crazy bugs. They were all over in the book. There was, they're in there. His garden was a very natural garden. What could our garden be? And when you think about all these things, think, is it a place of beauty? Is it a place of peace? Is it a place where you could play games, where you can have fun? What should this garden be? And I would love it if you would draw pictures of your ideas, or maybe you're a poet and you like to write. And with any luck, some of these will become real next year. Maybe not this summer, it's kind of too hard, but some things, maybe we can make that happen in this garden as we go forward. So do share your idea. So as I ask you to imagine this garden, I think about when we first imagined this garden. And we had a crabapple tree in the middle. And when we built our raised beds, we arranged them like the rays of the sun. Just to remind us of how powerful the sun is and what a vital force it is. As Unitarian Universalists, we appreciate nature, we respect nature, and we very much see ourselves as a part of the interconnected web of existence, or the web of life. The sun is a huge piece of that. The sun is what powers the plants that produce the food that we eat. They power the forest, powers the weather, and it's good to be reminded of that. So, and take our flame. Though we extinguish the light of this chalice here, we know that the light of truth and the warmth of love go with us in our heart. Have a wonderful week.